Hi, everyone, and welcome to DFIR and backups for Linux administration. We are going to talk about some disaster planning and recovery. We are going to talk about backups, why they're important, and different kinds of backups. And we're going to talk a little bit about incident recovery and how that is done. Disaster planning and recovery is a really important part of doing any work really anywhere, but on a server, because we end up having a lot of things that need protecting on our servers. Servers are where almost all of the important data from a company is going to end up living. DLP, or data loss prevention, is one of the ways that we can set our servers up so that we can try to prevent data being lost, data being exfiltrated. We end up wanting to do some monitoring. Hey, what's actually going on? Is any data leaving the server? We want to encrypt our data. Hey, what's going on? Is any data leaving the server? If any data is that data protected? We want to have backups. Hey, what's going on? Where is our data living? Where are our backups living in case something goes wrong with our data? Because disaster planning, data loss isn't just from, scary hackers. Disasters and data loss can happen for a variety of reasons. Maybe we want to look at the endpoint activities. We remember that endpoint is the last sort of place on our network before we end up, leaving it. And so we end up having different types of disasters. Now, we might end up having, natural disasters. Our server room is flooded. We might end up having sort of person-made disasters. Oh no, it's a hacker. But all of these things could end up being a problem. We might end up having a disaster of a hard drive went down. So just a backup is a really important portion of that because we don't want, oh no, a hard drive went down. Oopsie whoopsie, that's our entire, application, money making product, whatever it is. It's, well, good thing we have, multiple backups for this. Now, all of this disaster planning and recovery actually ends up having some rules behind it. Now, there are going to be some specific compliance rules that can be based off of what industry you're in or where you are in the world. So there are going to be some industries that have a very specific disaster planning and recovery that you have to follow. For example, financials, anything with credit cards, anything with healthcare data is going to have to follow a lot of the HIPAA rules in the United States because all of that is actually protected. So we have to not only, for example, encrypt the data on the servers, we have to encrypt the backups, we have to encrypt the backups of the backups, and then we have to have, a list of who's accessing things. So like, for example, one of the things you can do in healthcare is actually make it so that you can lock down patient records so that if anybody accesses the patient record, it breaks the glass, so there's a record of that glass being broken. Now, let's say, for example, it's not an industry specific thing, it's actually a where you live thing. Perhaps you live in the EU or you are a citizen of the EU, in which case you end up having data privacy laws, GDPR. And there's actually going to be some specific ways that your data has to be handled and it has to be protected, including, depending on where you are, things like the right to be forgotten. And if we're talking about the right to be forgotten, your data, including the backups of your data, is something that we have to be able to plan for. Having this plan in place is going to be really important for all of our different types of disasters that we might end up running into. Now, some of this is going to be just internal. A lot of systems are going to have, backups and backups of backups and policies for that. Sometimes it's third-party support because we actually are seeing a lot of, well, we aren't big enough to have our own server closet. We're just going to go rent some server space at, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, whatever it happens to be. So all of those still need to be protected in the same ways. And we still have to think about, well, okay, what happens if? And so a lot of this disaster planning is thinking of what happens if? What happens if power goes out? What happens if snowstorms take down something? What happens if wildfires end up raging through California? These types of things we have to be able to think about. Now, disaster recovery is after the thing has happened. How do we actually sort of pull back from that? So, one option is we actually have something called journaling systems where we can keep track of changes that aren't yet committed. And so, if we have system failures or power outages, that will actually be able to recover a little faster because it's basically saying, okay, I am going to add 1 to this number. 1 will be added to this number soon. I have now added 1 to this number. I would like to know 1 has been added to this number. And so we can have all of those end up happening. Another thing we can do is something called atomic transactions, where we can have sort of a special, we'll call it box. We have a special box. We're going to add 2 numbers together in this box. So we come up to the box, we keep track of the 2 numbers that we're adding together, what they were originally, and the space where that number is going to go. We get to the end of the box and we check to make sure that that's actually happened properly. If it's happened, great, we continue. If it didn't, we go back to before the box, so we are basically just sort of starting that again. Because one of the things that's really important, let's say for financial transactions, is we can't have accidental oopsie whoopsie, this has now happened twice. If your rent is taken out of your account and then added to your landlord's account, that atomic transaction, both portions need to happen at the same time. Your money has to be taken out, money has to be added, and we can't have that money, sort of lost to the ether anywhere. So if, for example, something went wrong, money was debited from your account, but it was never added properly to your landlord's account, we would want to reverse back and go back to before anything ever happened, so that if we needed to try making the transaction again, we could. So all of that can be really important for transactions that are a little bit more high risk. We can also have, for example, disaster recovery. We can have file recovery. So different systems will actually delete or so-called delete files in different ways. Now, the reason that this is mentioned is because some of the disasters that we're recovering from can be users. And so different file systems. Some file systems will say, oh yes, I have deleted this file. I have moved it to the trash for you. But okay, not really. They've just said if I need space, I can overwrite this section. So from the sort of user interface perspective, it looks like it's gone. But if you went through and used some of the special forensics recovery programs, the file's right there. It's in perfect condition and you can pull it off. So, if you let's say, have a spreadsheet of, I don't know, all the crimes you've committed. And then you go, oh, I'm so brilliant, I'm going to delete the spreadsheet. Well, not really, because you can say oh, I've moved the spreadsheet to the trash, oh, I've emptied the trash, but that's still really easy to pull up. However, we can also have files where we actually overwrite the file. So this is one of the things that you'll see, for example, in government systems. We don't just say, oh, I've deleted that file, it's fine. It's, I've deleted the file and I've overwrote the blocks on the hard drive where that file was actually stored a minimum number of times. Now that file's actually deleted. So how well you can recover the file, if at all, is actually part of the disaster recovery process and system. Sometimes you have files that you want to be recovered, and sometimes you have files where you don't want them to be recovered. Because if you said, oh yes, no, I have absolutely deleted your credit card from our database, you need to delete the credit card from the database. And so it's important to think about how that file is actually, being dealt with. Now, what to do in the case of an incident. We call this an incident, not a hack or necessarily a disaster or anything like that. We want to use less incendiary language. What we want to do if something unexpected has happened is we start by calling it an incident. Now, next, we want to verify what happened. Was this an actual incident, or was it just, there was a bug in my program and oops, I accidentally, I don't know, did a loop that's an infinite loop, and now I'm taking up a bunch of processor space. Like, that would be a bug. I just wrote my code badly. So first we want to verify that something actually really did happen. It wasn't just, user accident. Next, we need to classify the incident type. What type of thing happened? Was it a DDoS attack? Was there a virus? Is there a rootkit? And then we need to set priority. Is this a critical? Is this important? Is this medium? Next, we need to preserve all of our evidence. So everything that happened, all of our logs, all of our tracking, anything that we think might have been touched, we want to make a copy of, make a backup of, so that we can go through it later if we want to, figure out what happened, make sure we got everything. So like, let's say, for example, it was a virus, and it was an important virus. Well, we would want to go through and we would want to take a copy of everything on the server so that we can make sure that we were able to revert everything back to where it was. By taking this copy, doing a backup, and doing the logs, we're able to go and say, okay, did I get, these 5 programs that this virus touched? Oh, no, I only caught 3. Well, let me go back and look at, what was happening, when it was installed, what that program actually went for. And then we can go back and make sure that we're actually cleaning up everything, not just, kind of most of it. Then we need to recover. After we've preserved all of the evidence and put that to the side, we need to work on our recovery process. So we have to recover the server back to where it was before the incident. And then the sort of last thing that we do is a postmortem on the incident. Now, important note here. A postmortem is where we all go back and go through the incident that happened. This is not a blame game. This is not, oh, this was all your fault. I can't believe you installed that virus. I can't believe you clicked on that link. That's not what we're doing. A postmortem is what happened, how did we react to it, how can we all improve in our reaction. Now, let's say, for example, it was a user. A user clicked on a link, installed a virus. What can we do next time? We don't, go shame the user. We say, okay, that means we have a problem in our security system. We have a problem in our policies. What do we want to do going forward to try to make it so that this isn't as much of a problem again? Do we want to, for example, check links when they come in on email? Do we want to scan attachments before they are downloaded? Do we want to not allow users to install programs, just take away those permissions altogether? So like, that postmortem is really about what we can do to do better in the future. It is always going to be a high-level summary. We're going to talk about root cause analysis. So like, what was the actual cause of this problem? How did we handle this problem? What was the entire timeline? So, at 11:23, the user clicked on the email. At 11:24, the program installed. At 11:45, we noticed there was a problem. Well, now we can think about, what happens next. So we also want to think about, what did we do well? Honestly, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, realizing there was a problem, maybe that's a huge improvement on the last time where it took us 32. Then we can say, okay, well, what didn't go well? Well, it's, still 15 minutes. That's not really great. Could we get it sooner? Could we protect against this better? And talk about how to do that. Remember, a postmortem is a culture of learning and improvement. It is not a blame game. A postmortem should never be a blame game or pointing fingers or blaming anybody for, doing anything, including, it can be really easy to, users are so stupid. Like, we don't want to go down that road. That's not helpful for anybody. We want to think about this in a productive kind of a way. What can we do better next time? Now, one of the activities that you can do, you can work in pairs. Pick a lab that you finished. If you don't have a pair, that's fine. You can just do this yourself. Take the template that I've given you here and go back and write a short report on how the lab went. Remember, this is not a blame game. Think about the timeline of when you did things. Think about what went well. What did you sort of do quickly? what didn't go well and how could you improve it in the future? And you can kind of practice. Now, this particular postmortem incident is actually from Google from quite a while ago. And this was an infrastructure outage in their API. And so you can see how they set that up, what they were looking at, how they went through the process so that you can get an example of what it should look like. Now we can talk about backups. Now, backups I've actually pulled out of security only because I want to make sure that they get some emphasis and attention. Backups are an incredibly important piece of everything that we do. A backup is going to be a copy of our information, but we can have lots of different types of backups. Maybe we have backups of our data. Maybe we have backups of our apps. Maybe we have backups of our settings. Maybe we have backups of everything. We can have local, on-site, or off-site backups. We can have backups on different types of hardware. We could use a third-party service to provide backups. We could do all of the above. Backups are really useful for natural and unnatural disasters. They're really useful for incidents, and they are really useful for accidents and user errors. So when we end up having our backups, we are probably going to want to use a wide variety of backup techniques so that we can make sure everything that we want to have is there and accessible. So let's say, for example, we can have incremental backups. So that's just the file since the last backup. Maybe we want to do that every day. Now, if you have a lot of people on the team or you have really important things you're working on, you're probably going to want to do it more often. A full backup, a full copy of all of the files, maybe we want to do that weekly. A forensic copy is an exact duplicate of the hard drive. So like if you have a 1 terabyte drive, a forensic copy is also going to be a 1 terabyte drive. So maybe that's something we want to do monthly. Now, these are just examples. Different companies are going to have different guidelines. Some people actually do incremental backups multiple times a day. You'll have some companies that will do incremental backups every hour, every half hour, so that they are only ever going to need to pull it for, anything that happens, they can really easily pull it. One of the ways that you can think about backups is back up everything that you are not willing to lose and make sure that you are setting your backups for only the time you're willing to lose. So let's say, for example, we have a company of 3 people. Well, maybe we can have our backups run, twice a day because, half a day's worth of work for 3 people. Well, that is devastating. It's not, millions of dollars lost. However, let's say we have a company of 200 developers. Well, 200 developers, an entire afternoon's worth of work, besides the angry developers, that is a lot of work lost. So maybe we want backups every hour, every half hour, every 10 minutes, whatever that happens to be. Maybe we want our full backups to be more often. We want a full backup at the end of the day every day. Maybe we want a forensic copy at the end of the week every week. That's really going to depend on the company and what the company is sort of willing to do. Storage is cheap at this point, relatively. You can when I'm recording this in October of 2022, you can get like a terabyte drive for around $100. Kind of reasonably. So it's not, we might look at it and go, oh, $100, that's an entire week's worth of groceries. But like for a company, the company probably has people that make $100 in an hour. So it's like not that big of a deal. And you can also get bulk discounts. So, it ends up just cheaper the more of it you buy type of thing. One thing you want to think about with your backups. Backups are more than just servers. It's config files, it's applications, it's changes, it's users, it's settings, it's everything. So we don't want just, oh yeah, don't worry, I backed up, your code. It's okay, I backed up your code, I backed up your configs, I backed up your system settings so that when you're getting back to work, you can just sit down at the computer. One of the ways you can think about this, right? So everybody's had a new computer, or at least a new to you computer. When you sit down at that new to you computer, there's probably a whole bunch of things you change. for example, personally, I hate the noises that new computers can sometimes make. Like they turn on and they do all of that beeping, and that actually really annoys me. So one of the first things that I will turn off on all computers that I use are those noises. So going through and, let's say for example, I'm at work, I get a new computer, I'm forced to touch a Windows machine, and so I'm going to want to turn off all of the noises that it makes. I'm also going to want to turn on the ability to see file extensions. I'm going to want to turn on the ability to save files locally, not just shove them all in a OneDrive somewhere. I am going to want to actually see my systems and config files. I'm going to want to make sure that I have permission to install things because, like, if I'm working on a brand new system, I have a whole bunch of programs that I need to install. I need to install VS Code. I need to install a new browser. I need to have a couple options for browsers if I'm doing website testing. Like all of those things, all of that time is something that you invest in a new system. So if your entire system goes down because there is an incident, a disaster, an accident, whatever, you want everybody to be able to start working right away. Well, one of the ways that you can do that is make sure that the entire system, you can just hand it to them and it's like nothing ever happened. They can just start working. So that's basically the idea behind backups. Now, backup best practices, I have again linked to NIST here. And then security guidelines for storage infrastructure, I have also linked to. This is a white paper, special publication. You can go read that. And we'll talk a little bit more about backup types and guidelines. Now, next, important, check your backups. Do not just say, oh, yes, I've backed everything up and everything is going to be all roses. No, go and check your backups. Is your backup working? Make sure that, you're actually checking it yearly. Don't just say, oh yeah, I totally checked my backups 5 years ago and it was fine. Like, no, pick once a year. For example, May the 4th be with you. And that's the day you check your backups. Does it work? Where is it stored? How is it stored? Can I pull files? And then, this is really important at companies, how is it documented? So, if you're working at a company, who has this knowledge? Where is this knowledge living? Is it documented who is doing the backup? What's the login information for the backup? Where does the backup live? What company are we using? Are we using multiple companies? What are we backing up? Have we actually updated all of that? So like if we've, added a new sales team, are we backing up their computers? Where? Is it the same spot? And so you want to make sure that you're also reviewing your backup policies. What's being backed up, where it goes, and who has access to it on a frequent basis. Because backups are the kind of thing that most people ignore until it's needed. And then when it's needed, is it needed? So we want to make sure that we are going back and actually checking like, okay, yeah, no, we have access to this. Are we actually, backing up our server the way that it should be? Do we know where it's going? Who has access? Well, what if they leave the company? What's, sort of the backup plan there? So that was backups, disaster planning and recovery, incidents, how incidents, happen and get classified. And that was the second part of security, DFIR, and backups. I hope you are all doing well, and I hope you all have a lovely day.